Tom, we're here to talk a little bit about wireless technology and wireless point-to-point, point-to-multipoint wireless devices that we represent from CommNet. You and I have both had the opportunity recently to do a couple of demos and proof of concept type stuff with customers who've had circumstances where they didn't have a piece of wire or a piece of fiber that could get signal from one building or one area to another area on their compound. Let's talk a little bit about the considerations that somebody who is left with that, where they don't have a piece of wire, they don't have a piece of fiber, they don't have a inexpensive way to accomplish that. Let's talk about the considerations that they need to worry about when it comes to applying this wireless technology.
Sure. Well, one of the first things that, believe it or not, some of the sites I know you go to and I go to, security right off the bat. Right away people think wireless and they go, I can tap into it, I can get to it. Well, these CommNet units are, first of all, 128-bit encrypted. So it's not as simple as they make it look on the movies, just to go out there and go, ooh, I can listen in or I can get that data or information because of the 128-bit encryption. So one of the customers that, who I work with who says wireless they can't use because of the data security concerns, once I told them about that, it relaxed them a lot more. So at that point, that was number one hurdle that customer had about wireless. We did a proof of concept. We literally went out there, set up a transmitter, set up a receiver, put a pan, tilt, and zoom down at a remote location, took it up then to the receiver, had a laptop there, showed them how easy it was to set it up, first of all. And what we were able to do is, with the units, you'll see there is a power meter. Now, the units that we currently have, our demo units, have the power meter on the back. The new ones have them on the bottom.
Why are they on the bottom?
So it's easier to see. When they're on a pole, you can literally look up at them, see that you got power, you have communication, and you have a sense meter then at that point.
So there's multiple LEDs on there. One you said is for power.
Yep.
And then the signal strength is shown by the other LEDs, which
Correct.
1, 2, 3, 4 of those lit will give you better signal. So alignment between the transmitter and the receiver.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what we did is we set it up. We actually showed them that we had full signal strength. We were actually shooting probably about a half a mile. And we had full 1080 HD video. We had pan, tilt, and zoom control. They brought in their bosses to take a look at it, and they were all happy with it. So at that point, my customer, the head technical person, said, "Can we move the transmitter to another location?" So from where we were to where the other location was, it was about 400 yards away. So what we did is we moved in all the transmitters and pan, tilt, and zoom, went up to the receiver, and before we moved that, I said to the customer, let's take a look and see if we have enough signal strength now, enough bandwidth to be able to bring that video signal in, or that data communication. Because the transmitter and receiver had, this set had a 30-degree beam pattern, we were able to still communicate. Now, the signal strength went down. So instead of having 4 lights, we only had 2 lights, but it still had enough signal strength and bandwidth to be able to bring that video across, and we were able to control it.
So that's important, I think, because in a circumstance where today the customer had a one-to-one application, and tomorrow if something changed and they needed to add a second transceiver set, CommNet has an option where you can have what I call one-to-many, which is one receiver and multiple transmitters. So
Correct.
If you had to add a second or a third camera, as long as it was within that 30-degree cone, then those 3 units or those 2 units will be able to talk back to that one common receiver, so you wouldn't have to have a one-to-one. At that point, it would be a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 type application. What other options do we have in terms of antenna bandwidth?
Sure. Antennas themselves, we have, first of all, we have a 17-degree, and we also have a 30-degree. So depending on the transmitter and receiver set, you can look at how much degree or each transmitter will have on the antenna side. You also have, on bandwidth, you have 95 meg, 240 meg, 500 meg, and all these do work at a 5.4 gigahertz frequency. Now the distance too, from transmitter to receiver, you can go out to 2 miles.
And 2 miles, when you kind of talk about distance, it's a little bit misconceiving, because at 2 miles, it requires a couple of specific things. One is open air. Can you explain what open air means?
Sure. I mean, everyone talks about open air, point to point, line of sight, Fresnel zones, and they sort of mix it all together. But typically between transmitter and receiver, we always say there's a Fresnel zone. It's like a football shaped between transmitter and receiver. Typically in that band, in that area in the center, you at least want a 40-foot degree or 40-foot open air, so there's nothing in between it. No trees, no buildings, to get your maximum amount of bandwidth.
So one other thing I think is worth mentioning is open air. You have to make sure when you do this, you consider trees, right?
Yes.
So trees are going to get you a couple of different ways. One, now it's the fall, right, and there's no leaves on the trees, the leaves are all gone. Open air kind of takes on a different meaning, because I go out there and I look and I say, hey, I can see right through that tree that's there, but people will forget that they need to worry about the leaves on the trees in the spring, then it won't work as well. Could be interference. The second thing is, in that open air, make sure you plan on something, or plan on a situation where the tree might be small and not a concern right now. 2, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, that tree's going to grow up and it's going to interfere with that Fresnel zone and interfere with the unit. I even had an option, or I had a situation where a customer had the transmitter receiver that went across a parking lot, and it was nice because it was on pole, great open air, but they had a problem where there were some issues with interference when they parked trucks on this parking lot. The flat top truck disturbed reflected the signal and caused a little bit of problem. So this is one of those things that you have to try every time, and that open air piece is a big deal. The 2 mile limitation, most of the time, I mean, from my experience, you're nowhere near that 2 mile limitation. With that 2 mile limitation, though, you also have to be you got to be really high in the air and above, again, all that other stuff that's there. So really important that you don't exceed the 2 miles. And again, if you are looking at longer distances, the antennas have to be higher off of the ground. And again, you have to worry about that zone.
Sure.
You mentioned bandwidth, and you gave the 3 options that the product come in. Are they, some product is licensable, some product you have to buy off the shelf that way?
Correct.
How does ComNet work that?
Sure. I mean, ComNet, all theirs is 5.4 gigahertz, so it is already pre-licensed. There is some at 4.9 gigahertz. Now, I ran into a situation before, and it's something that never happened to me out of 30 years of doing, security and wireless. I had a site where we did some consulting, made sure that, hey, we had line of sight. We were going to put some cameras in a parking lot. We got power and everything. The IT department then did some testing. They got a sniffer, and they went out to the facility, and they could not use 5.4 gigahertz because there was a hospital close by, plus also the campus used up that frequency completely. So they had to actually go to 4.9 gigahertz frequency, which does need FCC licensing and approval, and typically is either for law enforcement or military only. So there are some avenues. If 5.4 gigahertz can't get you through, you may have to look at some other frequencies. Is it common? Not as common as normal, but again, there is an option out there for you.
But the clear indicator is you have to take the time. If you're not on a pole in the middle of a parking lot, it's going to go a short distance. If you're talking about an application that's a little bit different, and it's in an area where there's lots of facilities and other things going on, you have to do that testing and that proof of concept to understand what you can and can't do, because if you don't, then what happens?
Oh, you're going to have a problem eventually down the road. Some of this, though, too, you may actually do everything properly, and there could be something that moves into the area that's using certain frequencies that may step on your wireless. So again, you may do everything up front even, right, and something down the road may change in at that point. Same way with that tree growing or those tractor trailers coming in. Again, you always got to know what's around your surroundings.
We did a demo in a parking lot in Washington, D.C. between 2 buildings, and the proof of concept was, will it work? They were replacing some older units where they had 2 cameras, and each one of them had a dedicated wireless unit. In this application, we basically put 2 cameras over one. and the customer wanted to understand the limitation. They were kind of happy that they only had to buy one pair, right? So they had but we were going to bring 2 units back, and the customer said, how many can we actually do? And we took a small camera board out. We actually took 3 cameras on the camera board. We had a 1080p, 30 IPS. We had a 5 megapixel camera at 30 IPS, and we even have a 4K camera. And we went back to the other end, and everybody was really surprised at the results. We were, the test targets were moving around the parking lot. Everything was very smooth and no issues whatsoever. And again, we replaced those 2 point-to-point units with that one unit that was the Ethernet with the new IP cameras. So everybody was really happy with that application and the fact that they only had to buy one. So there is plenty of bandwidth on the units for multiple camera connections. The one thing I would say is that you might keep in mind you don't want to put anything, be careful as to what you put across these, right? You can buy the different bandwidth capability that you had talked about, but just be careful, don't overdo it, and do a live test. Again, proof of concept keeps all of us out of trouble. Helps. We do it a lot, and it keeps us out of trouble and keeps us honest, right? And again, it also helps us learn all the ins and outs of this stuff and the do's and the don'ts, which are probably the gotchas that you talked about.
Exactly.
You can do everything right, and something changes, or something pops up, and it's just best to have done that.
Absolutely. The biggest thing that you can say is, with these units too, like that one that you were using, you might have only been using 40 meg of bandwidth, so the 95 meg unit would probably be fine. But what do we always do with a video system? They never take things away, they only
add stuff to it, and the resolution goes up, which means more bandwidth, so on and so forth. So anything else consideration-wise that the customer should be aware of when we talk about this?
I mean, I think we touched on most of it. Frequencies, line of sight, Fresnel zones, distances. The big thing is, the proof of concept. Get us involved. Let us help you do a site survey at that point. The big thing I know with ComNet is too, these units, believe it or not, lifetime warranty, which is almost unheard of with electronic equipment that's out in the field.
ComNet does have 2 options, right? One is the units that we've held up and shown in the video, and then they also have an option that's a little smaller unit that's not what we'll call hardened. It's not made to be kind of out exposed to the weather full time. It's a little smaller, but keep that in mind when you make the choice. And you had mentioned, you never shrink the system. I don't think there's enough of a difference in price between the units that you have. If you have a pole with a camera, that lower bandwidth unit would be just fine. But if you're trying to connect 2 buildings together or something like that, where we may add things in the future, it might be wise just to spend a couple extra dollars and buy the greater bandwidth, because like you said, it always ends up that if the system does what you want it to do or what you're hoping it'll do, you end up adding more because you have to expand on the capabilities.
For that 15 to 20% more, it's worth it to have more overhead then built into the system at that point. Again, contact us, let us know, we'll help you.